Eve the Second Genesis, CCG, is actually a fairly easy game to play. I was told it plays and feels like Magic, but I don't exactly see it. I'm going to keep it simple and just explain how the card game is played. There are 6 different card types in the game, and I'll explain them in the order you would typically play them. The first card that's going to be your deck is your home region or starbase, or control tower or POS, whatever you want to call it. If this card is destroyed, then you have lost. This card is two-sided. When you start the game, it will always start on the side that says home region and starbase. There are 3 icons on your home region starbase. The blue shield represents HP. When that drops down to 0, the starbase is destroyed. The gray circle under it represents how much ISK is generated per turn. The bluish box under that is locations. That determines how many locations can be played in this region, which in this case is infinite amount. At any point during your turn, or unless the card says otherwise, you can flip it on the other side for a paid cost at the bottom. For this card it would be 8. It gains 3 plus shields, making it 10 total, but generates only 1 income per turn, still continues to have infinite amount of locations that can be played, and has an additional ability. All control towers have this upgraded version, and some of them have other requirements to win the game without having to destroy your opponent's control tower. The next card is called Outer Regions. A player can only choose 3 outer regions to be included with their deck. You can never play multiples of the same outer regions in the same game. Meaning if your opponent also has the same region, they cannot play it if you already played it, and vice versa. At any point during your turn, you can go ahead and play an outer region if you can afford the ISK cost. The top left number is how much it costs to play the card. On the right, the first gray circle is how much ISK it generates, which is in addition to how much ISK your control tower also generates, for a total. On the right of that is how many locations can be played in this outer region. Unlike the home region, this one can only have 2. You don't own an outer region the second you play it. You have to move a ship that you control into it in order to own it. And when you do own it, you gain additional effects, such as the top one here, allows you to draw an extra card during your draw phase. These outer regions is where most of the fighting in the game will take place. The next card you will most likely play are locations. Locations are, as their title implies, locations that are played inside regions, whether it's outer region or home region. To play location, you pay the cost on the top left in either your home region or an outer region, and this could be any outer region, including ones your opponent owns. You can play location cards into your opponent's regions, except for the home region. The top right shows how much ISK this region gives you if you control it, and the mineral on the right shows how much the minerals can be mined out of it, which I'll explain later. Just like the outer regions cards, when you control a location, you control additional effects that can benefit you. The next and possibly most important card you're going to play are ships. These are literally your monsters, your summons, whatever you want to call them from other games. They're your little critters that'll do all the work for you. Every ship has a cost on the top left corner. Then on the right, the red box is how much strength it has, while the blue shields is how much HP it has. At any point, if your ship's shields drop to 0, it is destroyed, whether by battle or another card's effect. When you want to play a ship, you have to start building it first. After you pay its ISK cost, they all have an assembly phase. To represent it being built, you will pay the cost and place the ship on top of your control tower. During each of your turns, your ship's assembly will count down, which is indicated on the corners of the ship. Once it reaches 0, it is placed behind your control tower, which is indicated to be docked inside. Some ships have an assembly 4, which means it requires 4 turns before it can be built, while other ships, such as the Ibis, has no assembly cost. As soon as you pay it, it comes into play. There are 2 spots your ship can be in your home region. They can be docked behind it, or placed in front to represent being undocked. In that case, it will be able to protect your home tower from any attacks. Ships that are inside your dock cannot protect your home tower unless they say so, and ships that are in your dock cannot be targeted by anything. They are literally invulnerable unless there's a card that specifically says so. There are 4 abilities each ship has. The first one will be continuous abilities, which are just simple text printed on the ship. The next ability is called executable abilities. These have a cost before an effect and can be played as many times as you can afford. The next ability can show up on any card, which is simply known as a when or if, which means when X occurs or if X occurs, then there is another effect alongside it. The next ability is unique to ships only, which are called commands. At any point during your turn at the home region or outer region, you can turn a ship sideways onto its appropriate tab to gain that additional ability. Command modes are very self-explanatory. The description of what it does is always on the card. Do note that some cards have multiple modes, but you can only choose one during your turn and not both, unless both those tabs happen to be on the same side. The next card you may play during your turn is a Starbase Structure. These can only be played on your home region or starbase, as they are literally upgrading your starbase. The top left number indicates how much it costs to play the card. On the left, this will indicate how much more ISK it generates for you per turn, and this will also show you how much more shields it gives to your starbase, increasing its HP. Starbase Structures also have abilities that will benefit you. Starbase Structures are permanent and stay attached to your control tower unless they are destroyed by another card. The last card types are news. News are your quick plays, your instants. These are cards you can play at any point during the game, even in your opponent's turn. They all have a cost you have to pay in the top left, and then the ability goes off as it should. Unique to the news cards are durations. Durations are indicated on the top, left, bottom, and right side of the cards. They tell you how long this card's effect lasts. Durations count down at the start of your turn. Once you reach 0, it is no longer in effect. Before the game starts, you draw a hand of 7 cards from your deck, and you can see what they are. At that point, you can decide if you don't like your hand, you can shuffle it back into your deck and redraw a new pair of 7 cards. But whatever you get the second time around is what you're stuck with. The game is broken down into 5 phases, which is conveniently written down on your home base region. The first phase is called Setup Phase, which is broken down into 3 different steps. The first step is every duration card that belongs to you gets counted down. The second step is Assembly, which is any ship you have in play that needs to be assembled gets counted down as well. And the last step is ISK Income. This is when you add up how much ISK all your locations and regions and other sources are giving you per turn. At the start of the game, you only have the control tower, which means you generate 2 ISK for the turn. I use dice because I think it's more convenient. There is another option you have during the ISK Income step, where you can forfeit your ISK gain to draw an extra card from your deck instead. The next step is the Draw Phase, where you draw 1 card from the top of your deck into your hand. If this is a 1v1, the player who goes first does not draw at the start of their turn. This is the only phase both players cannot play any news cards or activate any abilities. If you aren't able to draw any cards during this phase because your deck has been depleted, then you have lost the game. The next phase is called Management Phase. This is when, if you can afford it, you can play ships, Starbase Structures, outer regions, or upgrade your home region. For the start of this turn, I'm going to pay a 0 cost to play Veldespar, a limited card, so I cannot play another limited card in this turn by placing it on the left side of my home region. I will also pay the cost of 2 ISK to play Advanced Shipyard, which is a Starbase structure that goes to the right side of your starbase. At the start of my next turn, I count down any durations or assemblies I would have, and then generate my ISK, which in this case will be a 2 from the control tower and 1 from Veldespar, giving me a total of 3 ISK for this turn. I continue to my draw phase and draw an extra card to add to my hand. I then proceed to my management phase, where I decide to play another Veldespar into my home region. I then decide to pay 1 to build an Ibis, which has no assembly, so it's automatically built and docked to my tower. With 2 ISK remaining, I decide I will look at my region cards and pay 2 to play 1 of them on the field. Region cards are played in between you and your opponent's starbase to indicate it is a field that can be contested. Now that I played a region card, even though I'm the owner of it, it is not under my control. So I undock my Ibis by moving it in front of my home region, and then I warp it out into the region. It is now under my control, and I gain that additional effect that region gives you, as well as any ISK income gain the card itself gives. My third turn starts the same. I count down my durations and assemblies, and then I count the total ISK I gain, which in this case will be 2 from a control tower, 1 from the Veldespar, another 1 from the Veldespar, and 1 from my region card, which effect indicates I gain ISK based on how many ships I own in that region, for a grand total of 5. This is how the game generally flows. During each of your turns, you're slowly building up regions and locations to increase your ISK amount, as well as building ships to help defend or attack other regions. After the management phase is the battle phase. This is where things get interesting, and you really do get the feel for EVE Online. I have 2 ships in this outer region, an Ibis, which is set in mining mode. Mining mode is another method of ISK income. Some locations have a mineral on the top right with a number. A ship switched to mining mode mines out that mineral and will tell you how many it mines per turn. This means that an Ibis gains 1 ISK for each mineral, so out of Umber, it'll give you an additional 1 ISK on top of Umber, giving you 2 ISK gain per turn. At the end of my turn, I left an Ibis mining and a Griffin guarding it. During my opponent's turn, they warp an enemy Punisher into the region. When my opponent ends their management phase, this is when the battle phase begins. The battle phase only occurs if you have hostile ships in a region that is not controlled by the owner. If that is not the case, then battle phase is completely skipped. Battle phase is broken down into 5 steps. The first step is known as withdrawal step. This is when you can choose to have your ships leave the region before any battle can occur. These steps will always start off by whoever's turn it is, which will almost always be the player attacking. In this case, my opponent can withdraw their Punisher, realizing they might have made a mistake by warping it in. If they are satisfied they will stay, they proceed the withdrawal step to Defender. Since this Punisher that came in has a strength of 3 and a defense of 5, my Ibis only has an attack of 0 and a defense of 1, it cannot provide any help for this fight. So I decide I will withdraw my Ibis from the region by moving it into my home region, or another region that I control, or dock it into my starbase. Next comes the target step. This is where first the attacker decides which ship of theirs is attacking which ship of mine, and once that's decided, the defender decides which ship of theirs is attacking which ship of the attacker. Since there's only one-to-one ship here, it's obvious the attacker will target the Griffin, while the Griffin will target back the Punisher. Next comes the damage step. This is where you compare damage being done. All damage is simultaneous. So the Punisher inflicts 3 damage to my Griffin, which drops its shields down to 2, while the Griffin inflicts 2 damage to the Punisher, which drops its shields to 3. This means that neither ship could destroy one another and both survive the first fight. The next step is called the result step. The first outcome is that if the attacker failed to destroy any ship during that attack, then they are forced to withdraw out of that region. When the attacker withdraws, they are sent back to either their starbase, docked inside their starbase, or it can be sent back into a region that they control. Another result of the damage step can occur if a ship gets destroyed. Let's say I decide to leave my Ibis there for whatever reason. The attacker then decides to target my Ibis, and then the defender decides to target the Punisher. All damage is done simultaneously. So the Ibis takes a brutal 3 from the Punisher, destroying it, while the Griffin does the 2 damage to the Punisher, bringing his shields down to 3, not destroying it. Since the Punisher was able to destroy my Ibis, that results into a victory. The end result was that one of the ships that was in this region was destroyed in battle. This means you begin another battle phase. Starting with the withdrawal phase, the attacker can decide to either withdraw from the system or remain, which then passes on to the defender, who decides to either remain in the system or leave, and then continuing to the target step as they target each other, attacker first and defender, finally damage step, where neither one of them are able to destroy each other. This means that this end result is similar to the first example I showed. Since neither ship can be destroyed, the attacker is forced to withdraw from the region. Another example of how intense a battle phase can be is let's say my opponent decides to warp in 3 ships. 2 Crucifiers, and 1 Punisher. This actually helps the Commorant, as the Commorant's continuous ability is that it gains 1+ shield and attack for each enemy ship in the region. Since the attacker goes first, they decide not to withdraw any ships. Defender goes second, I decide I'll withdraw my Ibis from the battle. Next begins the target step. Some ships have abilities that activate at the beginning of the target step. These abilities go off attacker first and then defender. The Crucifier has an ability that sensor damps an opposing ship's attack by 2. Both the Crucifiers damp out the Commorant, bringing its attack from an 8 down to a 4. After those abilities are sorted, then begins the actual targeting. The attacker decides to target all 3 of their ships at the Commorant, while the Commorant targets back at the Crucifier, now that its attack has been dropped down to a 4 instead of a boosted 8. Next is the damage step. All damage is done simultaneously. The 3 ships together destroy the Commorant, while the Commorant is able to destroy one of the Crucifiers. The end result is that my attacker now has 2 remaining ships in that region. Even though the end result is a victory for my opponent, they still begin another battle phase, which they can use to withdraw any ship left in that region back to whatever region they have, or enter their dock. This means that if the attacker leaves at least 1 ship in this region, that following turn, they gain whatever ability that region says, and whatever locations are in play, even if they belong to me or another player. As I mentioned before, any player could play any location in any region, but whoever controls that region gains all those locations. Bottom line is that battle phase repeats over and over again until one of the results is A, a tie, which the attacker withdraws, B, the attacker destroys the defending ships, or C, a complete tie, and the attacker and defender end up destroying each other. It is important to note that as soon as the result phase is over, every ship involved that lived has their shields regenerated to full strength. Battle phase is a good example on how news cards come into play. News cards can be confusing as they have a priority based on whose turn it is. At the end of the damage step, the attacker is confident they can win, so they pass on what is called the initiative to the defender. The defender then plays a card on the Commorant which increases defense, meaning that the 3 attackers cannot destroy the Commorant, and the Commorant crushes their 1 crucifier. This results at a whole new battle phase occurring again. The attacker, still confident, remains and repeats the same target and damage steps, but this time the Commorant is stronger by 2 defense. The attacker-defender goes through the same results, both targeting each other, leading to the damage step. At the start of the damage step, the attacker plays Hired Enforcers on the Punisher, increases in strength. The total combined damage is still not enough to destroy the Commorant. The attacker then passes initiative to the defender, who allows this card to be played and does nothing. Then, at the end of the damage step, the attacker plays another card, Alistair's Disaster, which deals 3 damage directly to the Commorant. The attacker passes initiative to defender. Defender then responds by playing Mind Control, which destroys Alistair's Disaster, preventing that 3 damage from being done. This means the Commorant will end up destroying one of the enemy's ships, resulting in another battle phase to occur. In this case, we presume the attacker has no more tricks up their sleeve and uses the withdraw step to leave rather than continue fighting. As I mentioned, these cards are played on something called Initiative and Pile. This can be a little confusing, but it's actually very simple. Initiative is just another phrase for deciding who gets to play what first. Initiative is always given to whoever's player's turn it is, and then passed on to the opposing player. To explain the pile is very simple. The Punisher goes against the Commorant. Attacker goes first, has initiative, plays Hired Enforcers, passes initiative to the Commorant. Commorant player plays Guerrilla Warfare, increasing its defense. The attacker then plays Alistair's Disaster, doing direct 3 damage. Initiative goes back to defender. Defender plays Mind Control, destroying Alistair's Disaster. Initiative back to attacker. The attacker activates their own Mind Control, destroying Mind Control. The end result is that the attacker's Mind Control canceled out the defender's Mind Control, which was going to prevent Alistair's Disaster from doing 3 direct damage to the Commorant, meaning the Punisher wins the fight. News cards can be confusing, but when you play them in a ladder order like that, it's pretty straightforward. One last thing you can do in the battle phase is attack the enemy tower directly by warping your ships to it. There is literally nothing stopping you from doing this at any point during your turn, unless there are cards that specify your opponent cannot attack your Starbase structure. Battles against your opponent's Starbase is exactly similar to how a regular battle would occur in the battle phase. This is why it's important to have ships undocked and hanging around in your home region, and not just have them docked in your Starbase. Because if your opponent goes for the attack, whatever is in your Starbase docked up cannot assist you. To keep things simple, let's say these 3 ships were able to destroy the opposing ships without any casualties. Keep in mind though, if 1 ship remains, a whole new battle phase is conducted again until the result is that no ship remains, or a tie, which you would have to end up withdrawing from. Once the enemy ships are cleared, you begin 1 more battle phase but against the tower instead. You add up the total attack and any news cards or any other cards you played that will increase your attack and compare it to the shields of the enemy command tower. If you match or beat the shield amount, the tower is destroyed and that player is defeated. If you're unable to overcome or match the enemy's shields, your ships must immediately withdraw from that system. In a simple way of putting it, warp your ships into your enemy's home region, destroy all their defending ships, attack the tower. If you can't beat the tower, you get out of there. After all that, finally comes the end phase. There's only 1 step in the end phase. If you have more than 7 cards in your hand, you're going to have to discard 1 into your scrap heap. The scrap heap being this game's term for a discard pile. For the most part, that is how Eve the Second Genesis is played. The game is fairly simple and just involves a lot of repetition. You'll soon realize this game is more like playing Monopoly in space. There are some small details that didn't come up during the explanation and the small demo I did, such as you cannot willingly destroy your own card or sacrifice it unless another card of yours indicates doing so. Another detail I forgot to mention was during the battle phase. When a player moves a ship into a region and there is a non-allied ship there, it is locked in place until that battle phase. When that battle phase begins, you can withdraw unless your opponent has some tricks or news cards that will prevent them from leaving. Also, when a player moves a ship into a region to attack it, you can only activate if and when abilities and continuous abilities. You cannot activate executable abilities, as well as any command modes. The attacker cannot switch their ships into any command modes. Right now I can't think of any possible details I'm missing. I know I'm going to realize them as soon as I'm done with the video, but I believe I did cover everything. For the most part, just read what the cards say. A lot of them will indicate when their abilities occur, and keep in mind whose turn it is, as that'll dictate
which ability goes off before the other.